The old ornate mirror, hanging in the hallway of the Grand Hotel, had always been a source of unease for its guests. It had an unsettling history that the hotel's management tried their best to ignore. But one recent guest decided to find out the truth about the mirror and what secrets it held. Thomas had come to the Grand Hotel in search of a relaxing vacation. He wanted to stay in one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, even if it meant spending his life savings. So he booked the most expensive room available, the presidential suite at the end of the long hallway. The suite was magnificent with gold leafing everywhere. The bathroom was bigger than most studio apartments, and the bed was like a throne fit for royalty. As Thomas settled into his room, he noticed something peculiar. Directly opposite his bed was a large ornate mirror framed by heavy giltwood. Something about it felt off, like the aged glass was watching him. He shrugged off the feeling as just an overactive imagination. That night, however, he awoke to the sound of whispers coming from the mirror. He sat up in bed and strained to listen. The whispers grew louder, forming words that chilled him to the bone. Get away, they hissed. His blood ran cold. He was sure he'd heard voices. Had he imagined it? In the morning, Thomas mentioned the voices to the hotel manager, expecting understanding. Instead, he saw a flicker of fear cross the man's face, quickly replaced by a professional smile. The manager assured Thomas that the room was perfectly safe and soundproof. There was no construction or renovation work being done anywhere in the hotel. Reassured, Thomas dismissed the incident as a dream and went out exploring the city. When he returned that evening, he found a small crowd gathered outside his room. A young woman stood in the center, crying and distraught. When she saw Thomas, she rushed to him, her face pale and tearful. She explained that she'd been staying in the room next to Thomas S. and had heard his screams in the middle of the night. Concerned, she'd come to check on him. Thomas, confused, told her about the voices he'd heard, and the crowd dispersed with uneasy murmurs. Determined to uncover the truth behind the mirror, Thomas spent the next day researching the hotel's history. He discovered that the Grand Hotel had a tragic past. Almost a century ago, a famous actress named Isabella had died in the presidential suite. According to the legend, Isabella had been so vain that she spent her last days having her portrait painted, which now hung in the hallway. He returned to the hotel that night, resolved to confront whatever was in the mirror. Armed with a flashlight, he stood before it, trying to pierce the darkness that seemed to emanate from it. Suddenly, the air grew freezing cold, and the room plunged into total darkness. Panic surged through him as he stumbled back, knocking over a chair. A loud crash echoed in the sudden silence. Then, as quickly as it began, the lights flickered back on. Trembling, Thomas looked around the room. Everything was as it had been before. Had he imagined the darkness? Was he losing his mind? Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, approaching his door. He could hear the person talking to themselves, their voice growing louder with each step. Then the doorknob turned, and the door opened slowly. Thomas stood frozen, his flashlight clattering to the floor as he watched in disbelief. Standing in the doorway was the young woman from earlier, but her eyes were blank and staring, and there was a strange smile on her face. She took a step forward, then another, and suddenly she was upon him, reaching out a hand to touch his cheek. Her fingers, cold as ice, brushed against his skin, sending a jolt of terror through him. With a scream, Thomas stumbled back, knocking over his suitcase. The woman in the doorway froze, her head turning slightly to the side. Then, just as abruptly as she'd appeared, she vanished. The door closed softly, and when Thomas reached out to open it again, it was as if nothing had happened. The room was empty. Shaken to his core, Thomas fled the hotel, leaving behind the mystery of the haunted mirror and the unsettling specter of the woman in the old photograph. He never looked back, forever haunted by the icy touch and the chilling smile of the ghost in the Grand Hotel's mirror.